Hi, welcome to another episode of the Time Webshow. I am your host, Laura Diaz, and I'm really excited to have our guest, Robin Rosenberg, with us today. And we're going to speak to you about a topic that I see come up frequently for foster parents, and that is how to discuss the circumstances related to why they're in care and their family's case plan with them. But first, I wanted to share with you some information on a couple of recent training videos that we have posted to our website. And in case you forgot, that website is at www.jitfl.com, and that stands for justintimeflorida.com. And one of those trainings is a life skills training that we did for foster parents on Medicaid. And I want to tell you that it's a great training for all foster parents. There is unbelievable amount of information available with this training that's posted. We do post the documents with it in the slideshow presentation, and it has all kinds of charts that explains what benefits the Medicaid covers, and I have to tell you, it's a wonderful training. So take a look at that. It's called Life Skills, What Foster Parents Need to Know About Medicaid. Another one that we posted that I think is of a huge benefit is it's called Epilepsy and Seizures, an overview for caregivers. And for those of us that have had a child who's experienced a seizure or different seizure-like symptoms, this one goes through all kinds of those symptoms and different things you may observe in your children and what to do, the first aid action that we should take as foster parents, and I think you're going to find it extremely informative. So those are two recently posted, and we have a lot of other wonderful trainings available in our training directory. So I encourage you all to take a look at those, and it is always beneficial to help us in our journey to become better parents for these children. So with that, I would like to welcome our guest, Robin Rosenberg, and I'm going to let her give a little introduction, but I will tell you that Robin is the Deputy Director of Florida's Children First. She's also a children's right attorney and a foster and adoptive parent herself. So welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Laura. I started working as an attorney with a law firm that had a lawsuit concerning the mental health needs of children in foster care, and from that became the Deputy Director of Florida's Children First. We work on statewide advocacy, trying to reform the system of care to make it better for all the children that are involved in care. At the time I took my position as the Deputy Director, I was also just becoming a foster parent and have since adopted the first foster child that was placed in my home. My husband and I maintain our license. We primarily take children on respite, although we've had several medium-term placements for kids. My primary role with relation to what we're going to be talking about today is I work a lot with the guardians ad litem and attorneys that represent children directly in court about what their kids need and how they can better serve those children as their attorney or guardian ad litem. So both in my personal experience as a foster parent and the work that I get to do with the advocacy side, as well as in my organization, Florida's Children First. We're the adult support organization for Florida Youth Shine, the organization of current and former foster youth. So I've had the opportunity to talk to many young people who are currently in care or who aged out of care, as well as the children in my home.
That's fantastic, and I know this is an important topic to the children and the youth, and it's interesting you bring up Florida Youth Shine because I've had an opportunity to see them in a lot of our different conferences and things, talk about how important it was for them to have foster parents who were open and honest with them about the situations related to their, I'm going to say the word case. I hate that term, case. I don't know what you guys usually refer to it, but just because I don't know a better term right now, we'll call it their case and the circumstances of why they're in care and what's going on in their life.
Right. And when you start with kids, especially with older kids, it's their life. They've lived it. They know what their parents' behavior is like better than anyone could ever try to guess from the outside. So we're not hiding things from them. If we get very concerned, we don't want to traumatize children by telling them too much, telling them the bad things their parents are doing or we hear their parents are doing. And so we try to protect them. But it's their life. They live it. And we really have to respect them. And respect that that it is their life, they understand it, their situation, and respect them as individuals and treat them with respect. And I think if we use that as our guidepost for how we deal with children, it will help us get to the right place with them.
I agree. So Robin, when a child first comes into care, and I know that we might have to have a discussion based on different age levels because conversations may change, for a 3-year-old versus a 15-year-old, but so what do you do? What's your advice for parents to explain to them when they first come into care the circumstances?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that you're always going to do is talk about what you're going to do for them and what's going to happen in your home to make them, try to get them to start to feel safe and that it's going to be okay. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty when you go to a new place. So that's the first thing you need to do, and to build that rapport and to make them feel comfortable. And then you might start actually by asking them what they know. What is their understanding of what's happened? And you will be surprised if you start with that question. Many of them, I've had the 3-year-old who will say, the police came and daddy hit mommy's car really hard and then they took me away, right? So they have an understanding that something has happened in their life that's caused this. Now, unless they've been in care before or they're an older kid, they may not understand that they're not going home. The last child in my house came, he was fine when he got there, played with all my kids' toys, and then when it was bedtime, he was ready to go home. And he didn't understand that he wasn't going to be able to go home that night, and I couldn't tell him when he was going to be able to go home. So I think you want to be clear that you will tell them what you know, and you can't tell them what you don't know. You can tell them that you'll try to find out what's going to happen. And how many times as a foster parent have you gotten a call? I get them because we do short-term placement. Can you take one baby for one night? And that turns into a baby and an 8-year-old for 10 nights, right? The
true.
Best offer of what we think is going to happen, we never know. So I think we have to be really clear. This is what I know now. This is what I think is going to happen. There's going to be a court on this date, and the judge will make a decision then. Or it's my understanding, they've told me that they're trying to see if somebody in your family can take you, and that's a possibility. So you be clear with what you know is happening. You can tell them that. They're trying to see. And then be clear with what you don't know. I can't promise, and never make a promise that you can't keep. I can promise I will make you pancakes for breakfast. I cannot promise that you're going to get to see your mother tomorrow or that you're going to spend the weekend at your grandma's. Until it's a done deal, you don't know.
Right. I know that situation happened to me. I had a young foster child in my home, and he did wonderful until that very first visit. And then as soon as he saw his mommy and he wasn't able to leave with her, then that's where the issue started with him understanding. So a question comes up, what do you do to prepare the children for the visit and that experience?
Right. So again, I would start by asking, what do you feel? If you're old enough, what is your expectation? What do you think is going to happen? What would you like to do? And if it's just a visit, then remind again, this is a chance you haven't seen your mom in a X amount of time, and I know you're going to be excited to see her. And if they're not forthcoming with feelings, maybe scared, maybe sad, and you'll come home after the visit. This is just a short amount of time where you get to see your mom, and then I don't know how much more can you say, right?
Right.
And how much actually they hear, because just because you think you've said it doesn't mean that it got in, right? So you may say 5 times, this is going to be just 2 hours. We're going to, meet at the visit center, and you get to play with mom, and then you're going to come back to my house. But they may just hear mom, and then the rest is shut off. And then, so don't be surprised if they didn't hear what you said. And also, so many times we think with a visit, we think everything was going so well, and then it all seems to disintegrate when they come back. That doesn't mean that something bad happened at the visit. It could be a totally normal developmental situation, and it's a pretty awful thing that you had your parent and lost them again.
Yeah, and I think that this leads into a great opportunity that we have to help them, as the foster parents after the visit, sometimes to get them to open up about what their feelings were during that. And you're right, not to assume, because I think a lot of times it's easy to assume the visit went really bad, but it's really maybe how they are dealing with the loss again, the re-removal almost.
Right. And so, again, and my point about respecting them, ask them what would be helpful in the visit. Ask them what would be helpful for after the visit. Is there anything that you would like me to ask your mom to bring to the visit? Is there anything you missed from home? Or is there something, can we take a picture so that you have a picture with you and your mom? What would be things that would give comfort and that show that you are partnering with the parents, that you are, and let the parent knows that you are trying your best to make their child feel secure while they're with you. And so engaging and using that opportunity to begin to establish the rapport with the parent, I think, is critical. And, I've personally, I will never let a transporter take the child from my house to the visit. That's another traumatic experience, a stranger. And when I go to the visit, then I get the chance to talk to the parent and to see, is there a bedtime routine? Is there something that I can do that will make your child feel more comfortable? And then that builds the rapport to become a team.
I agree. It just supports the whole co-parenting relationship and really starts to set that groundwork. And I think that brings up an important point, because a lot of times I think some of the challenges come in because the parents may say something that is not quite appropriate. And I don't mean that in a way that they're intentionally saying something wrong, but maybe their feelings of guilt are so bad that they just want to make their child happy, that they might say, oh, you'll be coming home soon. They start making some of those promises that you were just talking to. So how do you communicate that with the parent? So we're on the same page together, but we're not maybe saying things that make things ultimately worse for the child.
Sure. Well, I'll start by what I would say to the child. If the child said, Mom said this, and that is, that shows you how much she loves you and she wants you back. And I know that's really what she wants. But sometimes those decisions aren't your mom's to make.
Right.
If she could make that decision, you would have stayed with her today. Sometimes it's the judge or somebody else. And so, we don't know whether that's going to happen. So I hope so, because I know you want to go home and I know she wants you home, but we're not exactly sure. And then, we have to say to the parent, I always tell them, my number one job is to take good care of your child, and my number two job is to get your child home to you and help you do what you need to do. When you tell your child things that we're not always sure about, it can be hurtful. And maybe this is your first time in the system and you don't know. You think things are going to happen in a certain order, and I just know from experience they don't always happen that way. So it would be helpful next time if we didn't try to put dates on it. Talk about what you're doing and what you want to do, that you're making your efforts, whatever you're doing. But it's really hard to make a promise to a kid, because we're now both involved in a system, or all of us, you and your child, and you can't really make those promises.
Right. I think that's good, because if we can get them understanding us working together as a team, it doesn't also put the child, have them angry with us, because if they said this is going to happen and then we turn around and say, then that kind of gets the child angry with us, because they do so desperately want that. So if they can understand, look, we don't want your child to come home and be angry at us because we're trying to be honest with them. So let's work together in really communicating this the right way.
And we know you don't want to hurt your child. You don't want to disappoint your child. And so making statements that you don't have any control over can really be hurtful when they don't come through.
So what is your advice for foster parents to prepare the children for court? Sometimes, that would be the next step usually after we've had some visits and they've been with us. They're going to go to court, and sometimes some information may come out there that's new, that's been revealed during the progress of the case? How do you prepare them for that court experience?
Well, I think the first thing is, do they know what the case plan is? And whether that's a detailed, they're old enough to read the case plan and understand what the expectations are of their parents and the services that they're supposed to get. So do they know what's supposed to happen in the case? And if they're not old enough to do that, then to have a basic understanding of the process. And that is, since you came to live with me, the judge said that your mom has to do certain things, and there are things that are necessary for you to go home and stay home and it to be okay. And you'll be surprised sometimes where, as a lawyer, we can ask our clients, is this going to work? And the kids will tell us, having my mom do that doesn't make any sense, because really the problem is, it's not her alcoholism, she's got mental health problems, and there's nothing on here that's getting her a mental health evaluation or treatment. So you can get her all the rehab you want, but she's going to, until that problem is fixed. So the kids will know.
That's a wonderful point you're bringing up, is these children, especially the older youth, are such a wealth of information.
Absolutely. And so as a kids lawyer, I will say, what needs to happen for you to go home and stay home safely?
Right,
and
feel safe.
I put that in the, advocate for that in the child's case plan, because that's the whole point of it. It's not check boxes, right? And hopefully we're getting away with parenting check boxes and really moving to meaningful change. But for a young child, I can say, the judges want your parents to do certain things, and at this, we're going to go to court, and one of the things that's going to be talked about is your mom doing what needs to be done in order for you to go home safely? If you have facts, if you know information, you can share that. Now, you can't say things that you don't know. You may know that mom was ordered to a 12-week parenting class and went to 2 sessions, and we're 3 months into the case plan, and mom's only attended 2 of 12 sessions. And that's a fair thing to share. You can't say your mom doesn't care, gave up, rather spend her money on drugs than transportation. You don't know any of that. You can't speculate about that. But you can say the judge expected your mom to do something that would take 12 weeks, and right now only 2 of them are happened. So we're not far enough along, probably, for the judge to say that that's okay. And if they ask why and you don't know why, you can't guess. It may be that they never got the referrals or the bus pass, and they desperately wanted to go. And you have to respect the parent and not make any presumptions about what's happening with the parent, unless they've particularly told you don't do that. But you can say, this is what's going to happen in court. This is a status. This is whatever the hearing is. If you don't understand what is supposed to happen at the hearing, talk to the case manager or the guardian ad litem. They should know what's supposed to happen at that hearing. And to best prepare the child, you need to say, this is the purpose. Judge will ask these questions. We'll try to find out what's happening. And usually there'll be an opportunity for you to talk to the judge. Is there anything that you would like to say to the judge? And really to prepare both with the expectations of what the purpose of the court hearing is, to find out if there are things in their life that they want to say. And they may be things about you as the caregiver that they may not want to tell you. And that's okay. Right. So maybe the guardian ad litem, or if they have an attorney, that person could do that. If they don't want to share with you, you can tell them maybe you want to write down some important things, or you can write a letter to the judge. Sometimes kids are nervous and they're afraid they're going to forget. So either they can write a letter that can be given to the judge, they can make a list, or you can say to them, why don't I make a time for you to talk to your guardian ad litem privately, and you can make a list for them. And you can also ask them what their fears or concerns are. What's going to happen in court? Am I going to be asked to whatever? When you find out what those fears and concerns are, share them with the guardian ad litem, the child's attorney, or the attorney for DCF. So let people know there's no reason for a child to go to court with dread, right? So if we have a relationship, we can talk to them, and then to let people know that or the child really has something to say, but they don't want to do it. In some places, the court is open and they don't want other people to know their business. So you can let them know. You can ask to talk to the judge privately, or for the courtroom to be cleared, or for your case to be heard at the end when everyone else is gone.
It's good to know.
Find what those fears are. Try to make them concrete, and make sure that people that can address them. Those are all really doable things for kids. And sometimes the fear might be, what if I have to go to the bathroom? What if I'm going to be sitting in here for 3 hours and, is there a bathroom in the courthouse? They call our name
and it's, I have to go.
Right. You find out it could be really concrete. It could be very abstract. And so talking through with them, and if you don't have a good understanding of what's going to happen, making sure that someone who does know what's going to happen in court talks it through with them. Make notes. Our minds go blank in court, and the kid might have had 5 things and then all this stuff swirling around, and it doesn't get addressed, right? So make sure that either you, if you're there with the child, or the guardian ad litem, or somebody says, Judge, one more thing. This young person has a few things they'd like to say.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Bring it up actually in advance so that they know, hey, the child wanted to make sure that we're going to express these. So the whole thing doesn't happen in the blink of an eye, which it does sometimes, and you didn't have that opportunity because you didn't prepare them. Hey, we're going to want to speak, so they're ready.
Right. Yeah, and even to let the court know, Judge, when we're through with the business, I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for you. And I think it's my understanding that the judges are getting better and better about wanting to do that, initiating that contact, and so hopefully that's happening.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot of positive feedback from foster parents that there's been a lot more opportunity to speak in court, which is a wonderful.
Right. Both for the children and for the foster parents, that they need to be heard as well.
Right. Absolutely.
I think that's happening a lot more. And then the thing to remember is that the preparation doesn't end when they walk in the courtroom door. If you're in and the other things are happening, while you're waiting for your hearing, they might get nervous. And then it's really important to debrief when court is over, both immediately, like, how are you feeling? Because sometimes it's very raw, or very hurtful, or very elated. How are you feeling? What did you think happened? And 3 people can walk out of court and think 3 different things happened. So you may need to confirm with the attorneys what I just heard. I think this is what's just happened. We have different things that we focus on. The parent may have heard just one little piece of 5 things that are supposed to happen, and they latched on to one. Oftentimes, it's very easy for kids to misunderstand what happened. So we confirm right then, and then follow up again later, because sometimes there's so much adrenaline, emotion, that 2 hours later you might just have a meltdown, right? When it sinks in, and so expect that, and especially if you're not in court, make sure you talk to someone who's trustworthy, who was in court, to find out what they think happened.
Well, one of the things that brings to my mind is sometimes when the case is not going as well as we'd hoped, then what is your advice? How do you help prepare the children if it looks like it's heading towards a termination and it's just not going to work out for whatever reason with those parents?
Well, it's like anything else, right? We are being honest. You don't have to spew out every piece of information that you know, right? But I think you need to talk to the child about the possibility. It is possible.
So you start preparing them a little bit earlier if you see it kind of going that direction, so it's kind of planted a seed in their mind?
Well, I would think if you get to the point where the case plan is amended so that there's both TPR and reunification are moving at the same time. That's a fact in the case, and the court is now considering that this is a possibility, that you're not going to be able to go home to your mom. So it is possible that the mom, and I say mom, but of course both parents, legal rights will be terminated. And then, how does that make you feel? Right? For some kids that might be okay. And I would start to talk to them about what they want. We have I think we always come in with this presumption that if there's a termination of parental rights, then poof, this like steel door has come down and there's this magic separation between the child and the parent. That's not reality.
No,
that's not anybody's reality. And in many cases that's harmful. Now certainly in some cases, but really the very small percentage where there's been serious physical harm, sexual abuse. But that's not most of the cases that we're talking about. So then you start exploring what relationship the child would like with their parent. You know, how does it make, some of them might be ready. They might not want one for, you know, it might be okay. Or they might want to have, you know, they might understand, my mom has a serious mental illness, she cannot take care of me. And I understand that, but she's still my mom. I want her to be in my life. Right. You know, so having those conversations and really, you know, the law now requires us as foster parents to be advocates for the children that we're caring for. And we have to be in that conversation to say, you know, God forbid our kid's in a place where 6 years later they find out in the newspaper that their parent died. They need to know. They need to have the relationship. Here's what, we've talked about it a lot. Here's what this child wants. Work with a therapist if that what needs to be. And explore what, so there's not that steel door that comes down, right? That this is a possible way. Explore with them what they would like to see by way of permanency. You know, if you're a permanency option, if you're not, if there are other relatives, how do they like to see their life?
Right.
You know, what's their vision of that, and how can you help them get to that place? Or if it's really not a good vision, how can you help them get to a place where they can see a good life in a different way?
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point, because it just really helps us to focus on the child. And even if we can't get them what they want, because I would guess that in most cases they really, really want to go back, but at least listening to them and hearing that and then validating their feelings and saying, I would love that too, but it just opens those communication doors.
Well, and helping them understand why it's not.
Right.
You know,
I
know you really want to go home. The judge knows you really want to go home. But you know, you understand that home has to be safe. And your parent's not capable of being safe or taking care of your needs. And we've tried, and hopefully we've tried, right? Really, that there are reasonable efforts and to help them understand. But again, be realistic and real about that. You know, don't make up reasonable efforts if the state didn't make them. But I think that's the helping them really understand what's actually happened in the case. As much as you wanted, as much as your parents wanted, they haven't done what the judge is expecting them to do.
Well, and I think, Robin, that QPI has really put a lot of emphasis on transitions. And I think that this all falls into that whole transitions conversation and how important it is to have these conversations and then to find ways to work through transitions, whether it's a reunification, whether it's a a termination and we are going to move them to a relative or to an adoptive home or whatever the case may be. And really, I think communicating with primarily the children so that we ease the transitions, but also with the other adults involved and help them. I think sometimes different feelings get involved and then people take on these different thoughts that aren't really happening, and we lose the focus on that and instead of keeping the focus on the children.
We need to keep the focus on the kids, and we have to be grown-ups. You know, we may have a lot of hurt or loss in the transition, or we may feel that we're a far better caregiver than the person that the child is going to go live with, or that we have more to offer. And we have to be the grown-up and put those feelings aside and focus on the child. If that decision is made, and I've talked to many, get a lot of calls from relative caregivers that aren't, the case is not going the way they would like the case to go, whether it's reunification or whatever. And the best thing they can do to have a good relationship with their children and their grandchildren is to have the best relationship they can with whoever's going to be the caregiver, and set aside those personal feelings, that past history. A lot of times with relatives, we've got past history.
I think it's even harder for them sometimes.
Right. But I've heard it too, just even from foster parents, of like, it's going to be so upsetting that, you know, when they're out the door, I'm done, and for me personally, I have to protect myself and just, you know, shut the door and be done. And whether or not that's helpful to you, it's harmful for the child.
Exactly.
And we didn't get in this, we didn't volunteer and put our homes and our hearts out for people in order to hurt children. And so we have to realize that it's our responsibility to take that little bit of hurt on ourselves, to have the best relationship we can with the prospective caregiver and with the parent, or for whoever they were removed from.
It's absolutely so true, and I hear that so frequently, and I know it's hard, and it's hard for foster parents because it's a loss for them as well a lot of times, but you're right, it is about the children, and we just have to stay focused. And I think in the long run, when we do stay focused on the child, it does end up becoming good for us. Not that you don't go through that little season of pain, but it really does, because when you see that parent turn their life around and you see them happy, or you see them with a relative, a lot of times you look and you say, wow, this is so wonderful, and I got to be a little piece of that.
Right. And hopefully even a bigger piece. If you have that good relationship, you can be an ongoing support to the family. And my son that I adopted has his biological family. They babysit for my kids. I babysit for their kids. It's a benefit for both of us, right? It's we just have a much bigger family for it. And so I think, we have to, I always say children can't have too many people that love them.
That's what I always say.
Broader and broader, right? And put out and put ourselves out, and the kids will benefit from that.
That's funny. That's what I always say.
Yeah. Well, Youth Shine did a whole training about that.
I love that.
About post-adoption communication, because again, this concept that that legalization of an adoption cuts children off from their past family it's untrue and unfair. And so we really need to encourage healthy communication, support it, because you know what? If we cut them off at 12. Number one, they have Facebook. They don't even have to wait to 18.
That is the truth.
They used to wait till 18 and start looking, and now they can find their family, and they will. So isn't it better for us to support those relationships, because sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not so good, than for them to feel like they can't share with us that they're trying to do that?
But I think a lot of times, and this again goes to the communication piece, I think a lot of times if you can have those communications with the biological parents earlier rather than later, you still have that relationship. Not that the relationship might not go through those challenging times, like when they do finally have that termination, but when you do the adoption. But if you can communicate, hey, I want to continue a relationship, but it really needs to be a healthy relationship, and here's why. So they understand this isn't about me, this is about the child. And if you can kind of establish some kind of ground rules on that, I think it can be hugely, like you said, hugely beneficial for everybody.
Right. And I think, and hopefully we're kind of shifting gears, but I think when I became a foster parent almost 8 years ago, there certainly was a presumption, if not an explicit discussion, kind of a separation in us and them, and that somehow the birth family was bad, did something bad, because your kids wouldn't be removed if you didn't do something bad. And really we need to understand that kids are coming to care because families have problems, and we need to be part of that solution in solving the problems. And sometimes they get really bad and they can't be overcome, but a lot of times they can. And so if we approach every family the way we would want to be treated, if we fell on hard times, if something happened to us and we didn't have the capacity to care for our kids at that time, if you treat people the way you would want to be treated, then you build that rapport and relationship, and they know you respect them and care for their kids. And that's the beginning, and it can carry through regardless of what the outcome is. That there's they're you and I in a different situation.
And going back to where we started the conversation is I think that if we're honest with them, like you said, about the circumstances and the case at the appropriate age level, communication, I think that it it goes to building those relationships all the way around, and also gives them more confidence and more trust, and it helps in that feeling of security.
Yes, and when I say I'm honest throughout, honest doesn't again mean that you have to share every detail or piece of information. You need to answer questions. If you don't know the answer to the question, you need to say and not speculate, I will find out. But make sure, especially if the children are asking questions, it's just like if your son comes in and says, where did baby Amy come from? Well, tell me why. Do you need to explain all of human reproduction, or is the question really, well, was she born in the same hospital I was born in, or the one that Joe was born in, right? What exactly is the question? What do they want to know? Why do they want to know it? There might be other ways of addressing the issue, the information.
Good point.
And it is also fair to say, if you have the information, I do know lots of things. I think it would be hurtful for you to know everything I know. Can we think of another way? Can I answer, what would satisfy you now? Or is this something maybe we can do with your therapist, or if there's a trusted person? Because I want you to understand, and it's your life and you need to know your life. But I think it would be hurtful to you. And let them get to that place. It's the same thing when kids go to court. We think they're in court and they're going to hear things that are going to make them really upset, and so they shouldn't be in there. And in fact, some of them want to be in there, and they're upset when they're excluded. And some may want to be out for things that you wouldn't even think are upsetting. Right. So you have that conversation of, this is what's going to happen. I think this might happen. Do you want to be in there, or what part don't you want to be in for? And so it's not that, because we can't know what's going to protect them. We want to protect them, but we may be hurting them by keeping things from them. Absolutely. So have that frank conversation of, this is what really concerns me about. If I were to tell you all of this, how can we mitigate that?
Very good. That's great advice, and I couldn't agree more. So, is there anything else, any other thoughts that come to mind that you'd like to share with our foster parents and other caregivers that are watching, that just in helping them in communicating? You have the most important job. You are the key person in that child's life. When they get up in the morning, when they go to bed at night, you have the ability to make them feel secure, and you have the ability to let them build trust in you by how you behave. And it's an incredible opportunity. And if I'll go back to, I think, one of the things I originally said, which is, if you respect the child and let your decisions flow from that, they will build the trust in you, and you'll have the opportunity to help them move through their life, whether it's to reunification, to a different placement, but to own their own life and to be able to grow from that. Right, and start healing too.
And start healing.
Start healing through the trauma that they've been through, and understanding they can trust adults.
And that they can turn to adults for help when new trauma occurs. Right. Because it will. And so you're helping them get the tools to deal with what's going to happen to them in the future.
Well, excellent conversation, excellent advice, Robin. Thank you so much for joining us. And just to our viewers out there, we want to hear from you. We want to bring topics and conversations to you that are helpful in your day-to-day journey as foster parents and in just taking care of these children in care. So please don't forget to email us, Facebook us. You can send the email to qpiflorida@usf.edu, or look us up on our Facebook page. It's Just in Time Training. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Robin, for joining us also and sharing your thoughts and all this wonderful expertise you bring to the table. And we just thank you, foster parents and caregivers out there, for everything you do every day to take care of the children in care. And until next time, we'll see you again on the Just in Time Web Show.